In March 2020, when our staff were filling backpacks with work and laptops to head into quarantine at the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, we thought we were leaving the museum for 2 or 3 weeks. A year later, we're here with you. We're here looking back in wonder at the compression and exaggeration of time and events. For too many of us, there's been struggle and uncertainty, loss and mourning. For the next year, though, we pay tribute through celebration. Hello, and thank you for joining the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. I'm Tracy Heider-Suffer. It's my privilege to serve as executive director. As we remember the many artists who've passed away during this time, I turn to my friend, jazz vocalist and composer Fred Johnson, who reminds us artists articulate humanity. They remind each of us the most important thing we can do, the most important thing we can be, is a caring communicator of the human condition. I like sci-fi and fantasy books. From A Discovery of Witches, all things are connected by secret knots that silently wait and give unity to the world. I hope you will connect your spirit with ours in celebration of the lives, creative genius, and gifts left for us by the jazz artists who have left us in the past year.
Hey y'all, Nat Adderley Jr. here. Glad to be a part of this little tribute to our brother Onaje. miss him. And all I can say is, Onaje, man, we miss you. I did mention that was his early arrangement. I did say that, didn't I? I don't even know. I'm a little touched right now. But that was Onaje's early arrangement. He did that shortly after he took my place in a band I was playing with a long time ago called Natural Essence. And that was when I first learned that when you leave a band, you might get replaced by someone playing it better than you did. Anyway, like our brother Kirk Whalum told me the morning after you passed away, Onaje, you will be in heaven. So I'm gonna work on making sure I get to see you there.
This is a small story about Candido that he was performing with my father and I at a Latin Jazz USA concert, and there were a couple of conga duels, like knock 'em, drag 'em out fights, and there were some very fast hands on stage duking it out, and I'll never forget that one conguero came and just played 1,000 million drums, and his hands were fast as lightning, and the audience went wild. And then Candy, with the tips of his fingers, he brought the crowd to its feet, just with elegance and beauty and purpose and intentionality. That's the kind of human being he was. So I'm gonna quickly play for you. He loved my father loved him. They worked together forever and ever. So I'm gonna play very quickly just a beautiful melody that Chico wrote, and I'm dedicating it to the memory of Candido. It's called Pura Emoción, or in English, Pura Emoción. Greetings, my name is Nabate, and I want to thank the National Jazz Museum in Harlem for having me pay tribute to one of the great drummers in the history of the jazz art form. But also, too, he was a tremendous mentor and a wonderful human being. And I'm talking about Mr. Charles Persett. Charlie Persett was a virtuoso on the instrument and was a tremendous band leader, but also too, what made him really special was that he had a positive energy that radiated
all the time. And his sense of humor, he's one of the funniest people I ever met in my life. And it was great to be part of his band Super Sound, his big band, for 13 years, in which we rehearsed at Boys Harbor on 104th Street and 5th Avenue in Manhattan every Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. And some of us would be late. We wouldn't start on time, and, you know, I myself included, you know, I take accountability for that. but seriously, the music was so intense. The music was grooving. I mean, music had so much depth. And also, Charlie exuded that depth with sharing stories about his experiences with the great musicians he worked with and the great people he knew. And also, he just kept everything light. I mean, if you had things on your mind that were heavily weighing on you, he would, just after a rehearsal with him, everything would dissipate. Everything would disappear, you know. He was that type of person, and he was a big football fan. I enjoyed watching football games with him. A couple of Super Bowls I watched with him as well. But I would like to pay a brief musical tribute to him. Thank you so much, Mr. Charlie Persett. You touched my life. You touched a lot of people's lives. Thank you. Rest in power, Maestro.
Diane Moser was the spirit of Montclair. Her energy was free, real, visceral. She was unashamed, magnetic. She created her own rules and her own scene. She poked at our need, my need, to be right, to be correct, to play properly. She lived in an undeniable swing. She was a ride cymbal pattern that made you joyful to groove with her. Her orbit was bigger than any tiny ideas about who's the baddest and who plays hipper or faster or higher. As a young man, I was still fairly young when we met. I wasn't wise enough yet to cherish every moment and seek every opportunity to create with her. I had met enough people living on that plane of authenticity to understand how valuable she was. Now I see that it was her introduction, playing in her quartet, that brought me to Cecil's Jazz Club, and playing in her big band that brought me to trumpets. She first allowed me to know Oliver Lake and the other master musicians of Montclair. This is my world now. And she was the introduction. As valuable as that was, now I understand the real treasure wasn't in her connections, but in her friendship, musicality, and vision. One thing I did embrace early on was that my son's musical spirit would be abundantly nurtured in her tutelage. I knew my wife, Rebecca, and I would be able to provide him with the technology, the notes, the instruments, but her love of him as a musical presence when he was 5 years old was a bountiful gift. Her enthusiasm and understanding of the creative musical impulse was singularly profound in his young musical life. I remember reading a recommendation she wrote for him when he was applying to schools that brought me to tears because she understood him and music at a level beyond any reasonable expectation of a teacher or friend. She was our guide, our friend, our leader, and wholly herself. We miss you, Diane. We are the Lee Family. We are going to perform Come Sunday by Duke Ellington. This was an arrangement by Julian Lee. We'll feature Jackie Lee on the violin. This is dedicated to our dear friend, Diane Moser. 3, 4.
Hi, my name is Jeff Hamilton. I'm happy to share a few memories of my good friend Jeff Clayton, who was co-leader along with his brother John Clayton and me in the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra, which started in 1985. Jeff was responsible for choosing the personnel in that orchestra, and he knew who to choose. I had been on the road. I didn't know many people in Los Angeles. John had been living in Holland. And so Jeffrey's reputation with the likes of Snooky Young on lead trumpet, George Bohannon on trombone, Bobby Bryant on trumpet, some of the greatest jazz players here on the West Coast, and with resumes like Ray Charles, Count Basie, Jimmy Lunsford, Tonight Show Band, various bands that they had played in. And Jeffrey gained their trust that this would be a worthwhile experience for them to participate in. Jeff was a character. He had a great sense of humor. He had the biggest laugh in the world. One of the things I think about first about Jeffrey is his sound, the sound of his instrument, whether it be any of the woodwinds or double reeds. He used to make his own oboe reeds. He would fix a car engine and come in and make an oboe reed. Not many people have those talents, let alone one of them. You're looking at one. The sense of humor was always obvious. And we were on a bus tour with the Clayton Hamilton Orchestra, and Jeffrey decided to hold court with his knowledge of cartoon show themes. And that lasted about 20 minutes of him going right from one into the next, culminating in All for Super Chicken. I mean, he knew all of them. So we were all just a captive audience on the bus and glad to be with Jeffrey's sense of humor. His sound could fill up an arena. Ray Brown, our dear mentor, always talked about you should be able to fill a hall with your sound, coming from the Charlie Parker world and Dizzy Gillespie world that Ray Brown came from. Sound was the important thing first of any musician. And Jeffrey had a sound as big as a house. So the sound of his instrument, the sound of his voice, the sound of his laughter. And I hope that we can continue to keep Jeffrey's memory alive with the sound of Jeffrey Clayton.
This is for Marlene and everyone in the Carmen family. My name is Aaron Diehl, and I've first met Ray through the Duke Ellington Society when he was president. And ever since then, he's been a great supporter of the music, and always loved seeing him out at performances, and sending my deep condolences for the loss of someone who is so sincerely loved by many. I'm going to play a piece by Duke Ellington. This is called Single Petal of a Rose.
Hi, I'm alto saxophonist Bruce Williams, and a longtime associate of the great Stanley Cowell. That was a song called Sylvia's Place for his wife, Sylvia. One of the things I learned from Stanley, since knowing him since I was 19 years old, was to always present grace as well as integrity and soul. He was a person that always told me to never forget my R&B or soul roots, as well as all the technical stuff you're trying to learn as a young player and implement. He was always very encouraging towards the youth in the arts and a motivating force for me, a mentor, very much like a father figure at times. Stanley was one of the most creative compositional minds and pianists that I've ever encountered, and would sorely be missed by many if they really knew him like I did. He was a gem to all of us. And this song, Equipoise, was one of those songs that's been loved by so many others, but I chose to play Sylvia's Place because, this song means a lot to me because this is one of the ones I first played with him right out of college. And Stanley is one of the greatest piano players that ever lived, and the Heath brothers knew it, Jack DeJohnette knew it, Miles knew it, Stan Getz knew it, and Woody Shaw. All of us really know that Stanley Cowell is a genius and one of the grand masters of this music. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to really deeply miss Stanley Cowell.
I'm David Durrah here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. Every year I would give a presentation of the music of Thelonious Monk. And in 2020, we lost two of our artists here. Alex Lane, who helped me with this project, and the great composer Stanley Cowell from Ohio. I would like to do a collage of Monk's music, melodies, and this is dedicated to them.
Hello, my name is Bertha Hope, and I'm going to remind you of a wonderful drummer that we lost this year, Jimmy Cobb. Jimmy and I toured Europe one year playing my original music, and we got to a venue in Germany where they ignored my setup, my schematic that I had sent them about how I wanted the piano to be situated. We got to the club and the piano was on the wrong side of the stage. Jimmy was setting up his drums and he looked at me and he said, "Wow, Bertha, looks like you got your work cut out for you. You're gonna have to get that manager to turn the piano around so that we can sound the way we need to sound." And that's what, he just said that and left. So I realized he was right and the job was mine because I was the leader of the band. Now, I never forgot that he offered that piece of advice to me, but he also left it up to my leadership to solve the problem. Jimmy was known for his crystal sound on the ride cymbal, so I'm going to play a song that reminds you of Jimmy Cobb and that sound. Someday my prince will come.
Hello, my name is Luques Curtis. This is Zaccai Curtis, and we would like to thank the National Jazz Museum in Harlem for asking us to do this remembrance for Andy Gonzalez. Mr. Andy Gonzalez was huge in our upbringing, in our musical careers, personal lives, just as a mentor, very willing to share a lot of information with us. And we remember just spending time with him, listening to records after records and watching videos, and him just opening up our eyes to a bunch of music. So yeah, this is something that we want to do for him, called Vieques.
Yeah, we're privileged to also have released his Grammy-nominated album Entre Colegas on our record label a few years before he passed. And this tune that we're going to play is entitled Vieques. It's a tune that he showed us, taught us when we were a lot younger. And we actually recorded it on an album of ours, but we'll play a version of this for you now.
Little Richard. What could I possibly say about Little Richard that hasn't been said already? I mean, I'm not going to say much, because Little Richard's greatest PR person in his career was him. Seriously, Little Richard told you all about himself all the time. He told you how great he was. He told you he was the originator, the emancipator, the architect of rock and roll. Usually when people say that, trying to make themselves feel good, it's great self-confidence, But in Little Richard's case, it was all true. Absolutely true. When you think of rock and roll, when you talk about a person's uh, importance, you gotta context is important. So when Little Richard started making records in the mid 1950s, you have to remember what was considered the norm for record buyers, for your average family going out to hear entertainment. The concept of race was just out at that time. It wasn't hidden, wasn't disguised. In certain cases, there were record labels at that time that actually had the word race on its label, which meant this was a record by a black artist. That would be the equivalent of like having a sticker of saying, parental advisory. You know what I mean? So they put race on the record, so the white families would know, oh, it's a black record. Okay, thanks for the warning. And coming out of the big band era of the 40s, as usually is the case when certain eras kind of die and phase into something else, sometimes good things can happen. Really good things can happen. Now, as the big band era started to die, small groups started coming into play, or what is known historically as the jump band era. Now, what is jump music? Jump music basically were small dance bands because, no longer could the economy, no longer could bands afford to have, no longer could band leaders afford to have like 18-piece orchestras and travel on the road. So they had to cut them down. Count Basie got a small group. And then people like Louis Jordan reigned supreme, not just with African American listeners, but also white listeners were really loving Louis Jordan and his Timpani Five. They were like the hottest band in America starting in like the late 40s through the early 50s. But also, you had people like Ike Turner, who was developing at that time. You had all these great people like Roy Brown, Amos Milburn, Wynonie Harris, Bull Moose Jackson, goodness gracious, Big Mama Thornton, all kinds of people, right? So they were more like, more strictly, they played music for the black audience, right? And so then you had people like Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and of course, Little Richard comes along. What separated Little Richard from all of them? I mean, first of all, the man was literally a fireball, right? I mean, think about it. Think about if you're like 16 or 17 years old, or for that matter, 47 or 48 years old, and you hear this. He claimed he has the misery, but he having a lot of fun, oh baby. Yeah, baby. Ooh, baby. Having some fun tonight. And then with the pompadour and the shiny suits and all that jumping up and down and ripping his jacket off and stuff like that. I mean, who ever saw anything like that? Who ever saw anything like that? And James Brown's always been my main man. James Brown never really gave it up to a whole lot of people. But the one person he had to give it up to, person he looked up to, was Little Richard. When James Brown was first getting started, James Brown made it very clear. So I think it's a direct quote. He said, my goal was to be bigger than Little Richard, because he knew Little Richard was the man. In fact, they both Georgia boys. When Little Richard went to California to start his career, he knew he was about to get big. At that time, I know people can't really figure this out, that there was no social media, there was no mass platform for people to kind of see and hear their artists other than going to the 5 and 10 shop and buying a record. But James Brown actually stood in for Little Richard, because not a lot of people really knew what Little Richard looked like. But, they both Georgia boys. They both had that real scratchy, throaty, shouting thing. James Brown had the big hair. Little Richard had the big hair. So Little Richard said, look, James, I'm going to hook you up. Go be me for like 2 weeks. And that's kind of how James Brown got his start. Little Richard took the Beatles on tour with him as his opening act. Many of y'all didn't know that. Little Richard's responsible for so much in world music culture, you don't even know. You don't know. You got to go back, do some research. Man was a great gospel singer, not only one of the kings of rock and roll, the emancipator, the originator, the architect of rock and roll. Little Richard was bigger than life. Give it up for him, y'all. Little Richard.
And You Being So Abundantly Blessed with Names by Lorna Goodison. And you being so abundantly blessed with names, I strive to commit each one to memory. To each is attached a glimpse of your face, to each a revelation, a key to your infinity. A recitation of your names is a singing, shining chain binding us to you, round perfect as the moon's face. We stand in the circle of light that is you. The everlasting, luminous go-round of your names, we chant them, order them to list, arrange them in a disc, color them differently, our favorites. But they are all our favorites. We love your names, and yet the life task of wordsmiths must now be, from the fire of the souls refining to forge more names for your shining. For the sum of the names we know now is not equal to the smallest joy that is you.
This past year has brought us to this moment. Thank you for celebrating life with us. What's great about art, says Jessica Williams of Two Dope Queens, is it can be a mirror of where we are at the time. It's important to make sure everybody is represented. Thank you to every artist who brought their talents to us. Thank all of you for being here with us. Thank you to National Jazz Museum in Harlem staff who worked with every artist and did everything they could to make this happen. Special gratitude to my friend and colleague, Ben Hartley, who is the executive director of the National Arts Club, and to his staff for welcoming us and allowing us space and a place until we can return to our own. Thank you for building a virtual home with us. We'll always be here with you, our online community. Like you, though, we miss gathering. I always say jazz is high touch. We crave the energy in the room that comes to Harlem and fills the museum when we come together. We look forward to reopening the museum. When it's safe for us to do that, for that to happen, we will welcome you home in real life. Until then, visit us at jazzmuseuminharlem.org. Remember to create. Expressing creativity is a radical act of love. It's an easy way to connect. Don't leave it to somebody else. Trumpet player and composer Adam O'Farrell said this to me one time. I'm young, but I know this. The most powerful form of love is irrational. It's undefinable. It's mystical. I say we're all mystics.